Sure as hell looks like spooky season to me. And welcome back to a new video. If you are anything like me, the smell is in the air. I hear crunchy leaves beckoning. I smell candy corn. And ooh, what's that? I hear my horror shelves calling. Spooky season is a lifestyle. It is not just for October. It's the time of year for wearing black. Okay, she may be wearing black, but she is also apparently wearing half of a cat. And listening to audiobooks. Because not only does it hit August 1st and I immediately start digging out all of my pumpkin decor, but it hits August 1st and my brain suddenly shifts into audiobook mode. I don't know if this is the sweet siren call of sitting by the hearth and being told spooky stories that is like deeply rooted in my Scottishness, or whether it's just that there are so many other crafty things and baking things and things that I would rather be doing with my hands and my eyeballs, and so cramming the stories in my ear holes is the only other option. But whatever it is, by this time of year I am ready to sit down and listen, or walk the dogs and listen, or if it's raining, pace up and down my living room and listen. However we can get those steps in, right? Yeah. Also, I should point out that I do actually do that with physical books as well. It's just less successful. That table may have been there for 7 years, but my brain is just in a constant state of surprise. And so are my thighs when they receive yet another bruise. Anyway, my innate clumsiness aside, I am here today to recommend to you many, maybe 10, there may be 10 here. These audiobooks range from classic horrors to horrors you might not have heard from, all the way to cosy horror and a little smattering of non-fiction, because she is nothing if not unpredictable. Shall we get started? I think so. The first horror on my list definitely does come under the bracket of cosy horror. It's slow, it's meandering, there's a lot of atmosphere. We spend a lot of time with the main character getting to know her inner demons as well as the ones that she is finding in the house. The first book on this list is There Is Something Wrong with This House book, because we wouldn't be on my channel if there wasn't at least one of those books on this list. There are more than one of those books on this list. I thought that it would be fun to kick off with this one that I don't talk about very much. This is The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. It is narrated by Eva Kaminsky, who does a marvellous job of something that I particularly like in horror novels, and that is when the main character expresses quite a lot of naivety, shall we say. In the same way that I am not a big fan of detective narratives in the crime genre, I am not a big fan of like paranormal investigators or anything like that in the horror genre. I really want the people who come across ghosts and weirdness to just be ordinary people, or people that you wouldn't imagine putting in that situation. And Adrian, the main protagonist of this one, definitely comes under the banner of, oh girl, you really should have called somebody for help sooner. Ashburn House is a grand old house that has sat nearly empty for almost a lifetime, and I say nearly empty because the owner of the house, Edith, refused to let anybody inside while she was alive. But because of Edith's secrecy and her odd way of living, she never met anybody to marry, and so she is the last surviving owner of Ashburn House, or so everyone in the village thinks. However, one day, much to their surprise, Adrian turns up with only a suitcase and her pet cat. She was pretty much destitute before she discovered that she had inherited Ashburn House, and so she has turned up to live there because she has no other choice. But what she sees when she goes into the house is really not what she expects. I describe this one as cozy horror because it's very definitely a horror book that, while making me feel creepy and weird, also made me smile. Adrian is a stereotypical skeptic, which is one of my favourite things about haunted house novels, because she does not believe in ghosts or anything else in the supernatural vein. But everything about Ashburn House is like screaming out to her, "Awooga, everything is wrong here." There's weird stuff written on the walls, the portraits don't seem exactly stationary, it may or may not be a single unmarked grave that she's found on a forest path. Even the act of of making tea doesn't seem to go exactly the way that she hoped it would, and yet she's still like, it's fine. It's fine. Until it's very not fine. Honestly, Adrian's entire ostrich move is a whole mood. The audiobook of this one is a hell of a lot of fun, and it's a nice easy read to kick off the start of your spooky season reading. Next up I have a horror classic. Not a classic like an 1800s classic, but a classic in the horror genre that I think everybody will have heard of. Even if you're new to horror, even if you don't like horror at all and you're just watching this video because you like me being enthusiastic about books, in which case, thanks. Hi! I really appreciate it when you listen to my rambles, even if you're not planning on picking them up. Yes, so even if you don't like horror, you will have heard of this one. It is the Amityville Horror by J. Ansen, narrated by Ray Porter. I have definitely told you guys about the Amityville Horror before on this channel, because I was one of those people who was like, I don't think I need to read it because I've heard about it so much, it exists so much in popular culture that I don't think reading the book's going to give me anything new, and I was wrong. I was so freaking wrong, you guys. There is so much in this one that you have not picked up and that has not been in all of the adaptations that it has had. All of them are bad, by the way. All of the adaptations are bad. Just read the book. This is definitely a case of just read the book instead. So the Amityville Horror is essentially a semi-fictionalized retelling of something that really happened to the Lutz family in 1975. J. Ansen has written this book as if it's coming directly from the father's point of view, as he watches his family move into this beautiful old broken down house in Amityville, New York that they are planning on doing up and making their forever home. Now this house was empty for a while. It was broken down for a reason, and that's because there was a very famous murder in this house by a man called Ronald DeFeo, who killed his entire family in a massacre, and so obviously nobody wanted to move back in, but it also hadn't been levelled. The Lutz family had been through a lot of stuff and they just wanted somewhere to start fresh, and this really cheap house that had some superstitious backstory seemed like a good idea. Lots of things seemed like a good idea at the time, I imagine. Although I don't know if empty broken down murder houses would ever sound like a good idea. But the Lutz family only stayed in their dream home in Amityville for 28 days, wherein they fled during the night. The whole family left with nothing more than the clothes on their back and what they could carry in their pockets. They left all of their furniture, all of their belongings, everything of value to them, and just took off. They refused to go back into the house. Later on, movers had to be hired and stuff to empty it. It was put back on the market, and they never ever went near it again. And J. Ansen reconstructs what happened over that 28-day period where everything just went so terribly badly wrong for the family, and it is so perfectly done. It feels somewhere between a diary and like a journalistic account, so you're always kind of vaguely aware that you're an outsider looking in on this story, but at the same time you're getting all of these like I statements from the father, like I feel like I saw this, and so it's a weird 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And Ray Porter is also the narrator who narrates the Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe books, which are like classic LA noir mysteries, and that's very much the quality of his voice. So he is a perfect reporter voice while also having an inflection that you just don't hear in language anymore, and it's just, he's perfect. It's just a mesmerizing experience. I absolutely adore this audiobook, and also it's really short. So if you're somebody who doesn't like to sit there for like a 20-hour audiobook, this one is effectively also bite-sized. What more can you possibly want? Let's take a step away from haunted house books for a moment, because I actually do read and enjoy various other kinds of horror, I will have you know. And this one is not only another classic, but it is an old favourite of mine that I love dearly. And it also neatly has 1 foot in the thriller genre, so if you're someone who likes the twists and reveals in a thriller and doesn't mind a bit of body horror, and also maybe if you're somebody who particularly enjoys the serial killer genre, whether that is true crime or thriller, this one is definitely a book for you, and it is Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. I don't think you can exist in popular culture anywhere before 2010 and not have heard of the Hannibal Lecter movies or books. And let's face it, when I say movies, what we're all thinking about is Anthony Hopkins. But I feel like when everybody thinks about Hannibal Lecter, what they inevitably think about is The Silence of the Lambs, and that is by far not my favourite book in the trilogy. And we are just saying the trilogy in this house because we do not know her. Canonically, Hannibal Lecter started in Red Dragon, not in Silence of the Lambs. This one was published in 1981. Silence of the Lambs was 88. It did come later. And Red Dragon isn't really about Hannibal. Red Dragon is about Will Graham. He is a criminal analyst who works essentially for the behavioural analysis unit at Quantico. And Will Graham was the one who caught Dr. Lecter, albeit he didn't exactly come out of that encounter unscathed. Now, years later, Will has been asked to come back and help with a new case. Will has a particular gift for empathy, a kind of empathy that he doesn't like, which almost borders on supernatural for his colleagues. He mimics everybody around him and is able to put himself into the brain of the serial killers that he is looking for and know how they would think. Some say science, some say creepy, but whatever it is, Will has a particular talent, and there is a new serial killer on the loose who is killing entire families and is moving in an escalated pattern. But as soon as Will lifts the grisly lid on this case, he realises that he is stuck, that for whatever reason this killer has absolutely no face to him and he needs help, which takes him back to the cell of Hannibal Lecter. The thing that I really love about Red Dragon is that it kind of came before all of the fame of Hannibal Lecter, and so it is Hannibal distilled in his rawest form. He's creepy. He's intensely creepy, and every single page that he is on makes my heart like do a weird rhythm. He is Hannibal before Thomas Harris found any kind of fame, and I love it. The reason I recommend this one in audiobook rather than physical format is because Alan Sklar does a really good job of actually making you feel like you're in the 80s. There's a weird kind of quality about the audiobook. There's not like pops and skips and things like there are in some of the other audiobooks I'm about to talk about, but there's just something about Alan Sklar's voice and the way that he enunciates things, and I guess like how he has contact with the microphone that just makes it feel quite vintage and it's special. And again, if you're not a fan of huge audiobooks, this one is mid-sized, and Alan Sklar is quite a like slow and considered narrator, so you could definitely speed it up to suit yourself. Next up, we have a much more recent release and a book that I have in fact just finished and absolutely adored. It's also an interesting one for me to recommend to you on audiobook because the actual physical copy of this is almost mixed media. It has tons of illustrations, it has diary entries with like text that's been scratched through. There's so much detail to be had in the physical copy, but I genuinely think that the audiobook is better. The book that I am talking about is of course Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Gallant is about 16-year-old Olivia Pryor, and the blurb of the book says that she is missing three things. She is missing her father, her mother, and her voice. Olivia is mute, and it is incredibly frustrating for her because she has grown up in an orphanage where not a lot of people have bothered to learn sign language to communicate with her. She has a chalkboard that she is forced to carry around all day on which she is supposed to write what she wants to say, but she really doesn't bother, mostly out of pure frustration, so she lives a life that is mostly in her head. The orphanage is a horrible place filled with teachers who don't really care about some of the children, and a very competitive atmosphere where the kids all vie to be better than each other. But there are other weird things about Olivia that she thinks people can sense. For example, she likes being completely alone and is frequently found in some very odd places in the orphanage. And for second, she can see what she calls ghouls. Not exactly fully formed ghosts, but parts of ghosts, kind of like echoes of the people who have come before. They are her only friends, or so she thinks, until the matron of the orphanage receives a letter. That letter is from Olivia's uncle. It begs her to come home to Gallant, their family home, where she will be lovingly received. So off she goes with her ghouls and only her mother's journal, the one thing that she had that was only hers. When Olivia gets there, she does find the big, old, beautiful, slightly crumbling family home, but no uncle. Our uncle died months and months and months ago, and to anybody's knowledge there, he didn't send Olivia a letter. Ooh, do you not just feel all creepy and weird listening to that synopsis? Because I definitely did. As soon as I read it, I was like, I don't care if the book's pretty, I want to read it. The audiobook of Gallant is read by Julian Rind-Tutt, and one of the things that I particularly love about it is it feels kind of like being told an old school fairy tale story. That is the quality of his voice. He's very like whimsical and melodical, and he takes you along at a very unhurried pace, and so when horrible things happen, it's kind of like, wait a minute, what did you say? And the other really cool thing about this audiobook is that there are also sound effects. So where Olivia's mother has written her journal, we do hear her quill scratching across the page, and we also hear her strikeouts, which I was really worried that they weren't going to be able to express in the audiobook which passages she had struck out and she didn't want Olivia or anybody else to read, and which passages were just written, but they managed it perfectly. There's some creepy, weird piano sequences which are included in here. There's little gusts of wind. It's just perfect. I thoroughly recommend. Speaking of audiobooks that have some interesting sound effects, there is a book that I had to include on this list, which actually I didn't love all that much as a book in itself. I really loved the setting, I really loved the main character, but I felt like where the plot went, like the reveal and the conclusion for it, for me, were just a bit freaking weird. And not in the like, oh, this is weird, like speculative way, just like a, that was an odd choice. But it makes its way onto this list because of the pure quality of the audiobook, which is second to none. This is Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. This one actually has two narrators, Ty Salmons and Bronson Pinchot, and together they have two very different characters and some very different villains. That's all I'm going to say about that. I think anybody who loves a little bit of old school slasher in the horror genre already knows about Grady Hendrix. Horrorstör is set in essentially a rip-off version of IKEA, and again this is another one of those physical books that has a lot of extras in it. It has a lot of inlaid pages which look like IKEA furniture instructions or the maps of IKEA stores or the order forms, but although they're fun, you can really enjoy it without all of that. So in this knockoff IKEA, which exists in Cleveland, Ohio, by the way, and I think Grady Hendrix did that because he was like, where is the most ordinary place in America I can possibly pick? And Cleveland was the one that won. There are odd things happening. The employees are coming in the morning and they are finding bookcases knocked over. They're finding like drinking glasses filled with liquids. There are some very odd bodily fluids that they have found on a couple of the couches, and really the manager just thinks that this is either kids somehow getting into the store at night or it's homeless people who are, I don't know, wrecking the place. And so he tasks 3 of the employees, who have to beg for the overtime for it by the way, to stay overnight in the building and to try and work out exactly what is going on. This one made the list for pure quality of the audiobook production because there are sound effects, there are jingles at the start of every chapter for the Orsk catalogue, which are slowly getting more and more creepy as the book goes on. They're slowly starting to sound less like copy written by people who are promoting Orsk and more like the things that are living in Orsk in the night time, if you know what I mean. The little bits of music and everything in between the horror just make this one a wild ride. Suddenly you're listening to why you really should buy this chair, and then all of a sudden the chair is actually a torture device, and it's just trippy. If I only owned this one in physical form, I would probably never reread it, but because I have the audiobook, I am always tempted when I flick past it in my audio library because it was just a ton of fun. Next up, I have the only straight up non-fiction on this list. So although the Amityville Horror was technically a true story, it is a fictionalised account. This one, on the other hand, is straight up non-fiction. It is a kind of memoir, kind of biography, kind of journalistic look at a couple of people that I think you guys might be familiar with. This one is The Demonologist by Gerard, Brittle, narrated by Todd Habercorn, and this one is literally subtitled something like The Extraordinary Life and Careers of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Again, if you are a horror movie fan, you probably know the names Ed and Lorraine Warren from the Conjuring franchise, which I'm not gonna lie is actually one of my comfort watches. Like, I put it on in the background when I'm sad and I'm working on stuff and it makes me happy. I don't really know what that says about me and I choose not to interrogate it. Don't psychoanalyze me, just take my book recommendations, it's safer. But the reason the Conjuring franchise exists is because Ed and Lorraine Warren were real life psychic investigators and demonologists, and I say real life in inverted commas because I don't care what you believe. Whether you are somebody who thinks that ghosts and demons really exist or whether you are wrong, I don't mind. And it doesn't matter on which side of the fence that you sit, whether you're on the safe side with me or whether you're on the other side who just casually owns Ouija boards in your house. Either way, no matter what you believe, you can definitely still enjoy this one. So Ed and Lorraine Warren were active for a whole lot of years and they have been involved in some really big and really prominent cases, the Amityville Horror actually being one of them. Lorraine always claimed to have psychic abilities and to actually be able to see ghosts, and Ed was actually one of the only people who was not an ordained priest of the Catholic Church who was actually sanctioned to perform Catholic Church approved exorcisms, like proper exorcisms in their eyes. He had been trained in the way that they train their priests to do so. And this book follows their career pretty much from its inception through some of their bigger, like flashier cases, but also some of their smaller, weirder ones that have just never been reported. And the interesting thing about it is not just this like huge fantastical story of their lives, which is just very, very weird lives that they had, but also towards the end of the book it actually includes some audio recordings which are genuine vintage audio recordings and so have the pops and the scratches and the grainy quality that you got from the time, and also some audio from footage of actual exorcisms that Ed performed where you can hear the person's real voice and also like the demonic possession voice, I guess, on top of that. And again, genuinely, whatever you believe about the authenticity of the Warrens themselves, this book is a whole heap of interesting information in one place. Now for one of my favourite audiobooks in the entire world, a book that I come back to again and again and again. One of those horror books that is both everything that I love about There's Something Wrong with This House books and everything that I love about a kick-ass female character all in one place. This is The Family Plot by Cherie Priest. It is narrated by Kate Udall, and oh, I don't have enough words to say how much I love this book, but I'm gonna try because it's kind of my job. The Family Plot begins in the storefront of Music City Salvage. They are a salvage company which go into old buildings and take out all of the classic features and then sell them at auction, and that's everything from like stained glass and beautiful old wood that can be reclaimed for other things and actual like antique pieces of furniture themselves. Unfortunately, Music City Salvage have not been in profit for a while. Some of the jobs that they have gone to have not been exactly the investments that they hoped that they were going to be, and so they desperately need a big job that's going to pay a lot of money in order to actually like pay people's wages and keep them out of administration. So when Augusta Winthrop walks through the front door, they think that their luck is finally in. She has a huge old family house out in the country which she just wants rid of. The last of her relatives who actually cared about the house has finally died. It's now all hers to do with whatever she wants, and she just wants it to be gone. So although it sounds a little bit too good to be true, Chuck, who owns the business, says, yes ma'am, we will do this, and he sends Dahlia and a crew of workers down to the house to get started. Now, Dahlia is one of my favourite characters that I have ever read in a horror novel, just ever. She is so incredibly relatable. She makes me think about T. Kingfisher's characters, specifically Mouse in the Twisted Ones. They would get on very, very well. She is in a weird place in her life because she is processing a divorce and she's trying to work out what the landscape of her world looks like now without the people that used to be in it and the stuff that used to be hers and the house that she thought was going to be her forever home. So when she comes to this old house in the country, she is bringing a lot of baggage with her, and the house knows it. Oh yeah, and just to top it all off, because Music City Salvage is so broke, they decide to not rent hotel rooms and instead they decide to stay over in the creepy old abandoned family home. I love people's poor choices. Now for a classic horror, and one that I'm not going to tell you very much about in terms of plot because everybody really does genuinely know the plot of this by now, right? But one that I am going to wax poetic about the audiobook for is Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, read by none other than Richard Armitage. Guys, gals and non-binary pals, Richard Armitage has a voice that should genuinely be illegal. Now, while I have tried to make sure that most of the audiobooks on this list can be found in various places, this particular audiobook can only be found on Audible. I actually picked up this collection without knowing that Richard Armitage was part of it, just because I really love old horror novels. And while Frankenstein and Dracula are two of my favourites that I come back to again and again and again, I hadn't read Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde since the start of my university degree, which was quite a while ago now, and I thought it was probably time for a reread, and I was not disappointed. There is just nothing like Richard Armitage doing a tortured character who is arguing with their own conscience, and I mean really that is basically the basis for Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde. Really is just one of those voice actors who I just wish would get so many more contracts. Petition for Richard Armitage to replace Sean Bean in the next version of Civilization. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, this recommendation is short and sweet, almost as sweet as Richard Armitage himself. Okay, please save me from myself and let's talk about the next book. Okay, to be fair, I don't know how much actual saving me from myself we are doing here because the next book is also narrated by somebody who... I don't know, has this just turned into audiobook Thirst Traps by Leanne? I didn't mean it to. I don't know how we got here. The next book that I'm talking about is another that is really popular in the horror genre, but it is another one that although I really like it, I don't absolutely love it. And if it wasn't for the audiobook, I wouldn't reread it. But with the audiobook, you definitely believe that I am revisiting this one. The book that I am talking about is, of course, Nosferatu by Joe Hill, and it is narrated by none other than Kate Mulgrew. Whether you were a vintage Janeway fan or whether you are a fake Kate Mulgrew fan and you found her through Orange is the New Black, however you came to Kate Mulgrew, I guarantee you that you, like me, are probably absolutely obsessed with her voice because it's just so unique. It's so original, and I do not blame Joe Hill at all for wanting Kate Mulgrew to narrate all of his books because she pretty much does. If you like this one, there are plenty of other Joe Hill books to go on to. But this one is a little bit different. It's a little bit something special because it also has one of my favourite things in the absolute world in it, and that is a child protagonist who is written by an adult for an adult audience. This one is about a little girl called Victoria McQueen. She is a little bit neglected, a little bit left to her own devices, and she spends a lot of time on her vintage bicycle, and she not only takes that bike pretty much everywhere, but she goes pretty much everywhere, including places that she really shouldn't. Because you see, Victoria has a talent for finding things, all the way from lost bracelets to actual missing people. And one day, while she is cycling on her bike, desperately trying to find one such missing person, she cycles across a bridge, and she realises that this bridge will take her anywhere she wants to go. Anytime, any place, all she has to do is cycle across this bridge and she is there. But Victoria is talented and also incredibly nosy, and one day she goes looking for something that she really shouldn't, and she comes across a person who will haunt her for the rest of her life. That person is Charles Talent Manx. He also has a car that will take him pretty much anywhere that he wants to go, and he has a talent for getting children to come into that car and for not bringing them home again. Instead, he takes them to a place called Christmasland. Now, where I've said to you that earlier books on this list were bite-sized audiobooks, that is absolutely not the case for this one. Its actual physical format is 720 pages long. This one is a tour. It is a commitment. You have to buckle yourself in because even at 2x speed it is not going to take off that many hours. But I think it is absolutely worth it for all of the things that Kate Mulgrew can do with her voice. She's one of those narrators that takes you on the emotional roller coaster with her. You're not just listening to her, you're feeling the things that she's feeling. She's speaking to you in a way that some other narrators can't do. So although this one is definitely a dedication to make, I think it is very much worth it. Now, the final book that I have on this list is once again a kind of haunted house horror. Although it's not so much haunted house as haunted thing at the back of the house, thing outside the house in the garden. Just bear with me, okay? The last book on this list is The Waiting Room by F.G. Cottam, read by David Rintoul. This one is about Martin Stride. He is a retired rock star and he has taken his young family away to a big country estate that is far away from paparazzis in the spotlight. He is done, he's over it, he doesn't want to be the subject of speculation or articles or paparazzi anymore. He just wants to live a very, very quiet life, watching his children grow up and trying to make sense of this ramshackle house. As I suggested, however, the house itself is not actually the problem. At the very edge of the grounds of this country estate, there is an old abandoned railway line and a waiting platform with a waiting room attached to it. It's derelict and falling apart, but it has been there since the Edwardian time when soldiers were coming home from war. And when they first moved into this house, Martin's kids thought this was the best playground that they could possibly have. It's a railway track with no active trains that they can run up and down. But now, just a little while later, they won't go anywhere near it, and they won't say why. Initially, Martin decides that he's going to investigate the waiting room because he wants to know what happened to his kids, but a series of very, very strange things happen to him, and he also decides that they need help. Some people may Google mediums, some people may go to priests, but Martin came from a rock and roll lifestyle. He came from a lifestyle of celebrity, and so instead what he does is he contacts a paranormal television crew. This crew is led by ghost hunter Julian Creed. He is a TV psychic, he's really, really famous and really, really popular, and Martin's like, okay, you are the guy for this job. But what Martin doesn't realise is that Julian is a fake. He doesn't believe in ghosts, he doesn't believe in anything supernatural at all, and so when he comes there he thinks he's just going to make another like, ooh, there was a weird noise show, and what he discovers is not fake. It's very, very real, and he doesn't know what to do about it. This one is narrated by David Rintoul, and he does a lot of non-fiction audiobooks, and predominantly the non-fiction stuff that he narrates is stuff either surrounding the Second World War or things that are historic military based. And because of that, he has a very unique tone. I haven't really heard any other audiobook narrators that sound like him in the fiction genre anywhere. He lends a kind of weird authority to the novel that makes you feel like you're actually listening to something that's more a historical account than it is a fiction. And there were a couple of times where I actually had to pause and take a step back and be like, okay, that was just hella creepy and I'm not okay with it. Like, sir, you're too convincing, sir. Can you stop? I am really creeped out. And just because I've mentioned audiobook lengths quite a lot in this video, this one sits right in what I would consider to be my audiobook sweet spot. It is just over 10 hours. So we're not on a huge epic voyage, and we're not just a little bite-sized thing that you're going to read and then forget about. We're right in the middle. You're dedicating some time to this baby, but it's also not, you know, the rest of your life or the next 3 months. So there we go, guys. There are 10 horrifying audiobooks to kick off your spooky reads for the season. I'm just so excited that it's like overcast and chilly outside. I had a blanket for the first time last night. It is definitely time to read books that make you feel chill in your soul. It's time to read books that make you want to grab your other half or your cat and, you know, hide under them. And I think everything on this list is going to help you do that. So if you've got this far, leave me the ghost emoji down in the comments below, and also tell me what is your favourite creepy or atmospheric, maybe it's a gothic audiobook, or is it actually just something super cozy and romancy because that's how you like your autumn to look? Let me know if you have loved any of the books that I have talked about down below, or if you have any recommendations for me. If you are new to the channel, please consider sticking around for more spooky shenanigans starting like right now. And if you have enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that thumbs up so that I can keep coming back to you and bringing you more lists of my favourite things. I will speak to you all really soon. Bye! And you know, I do like the fact that it's overcast outside, but I do not like that I'm back to having a studio light. I'm melting.